Hi, my name is Pierre Schiller. I am a 3D animator and VFX compositor, as well as a Blender Foundation certified trainer. This is going to be my first time-lapse video for a full workflow, and I will also answer questions people have about Blender around the internet while the video completes. The way the time-lapse video works is the following. You check out any given point in time in the video, copy that hour, minute, and second, and paste it here in the comment section along with your very own question. For that, I have marked sections of the video with a bright green color at the top or bottom of the screen, so you can identify the section at a glance. Also, around minute 40, I started to label some of the specific names I gave to the video file, so that it is most likely you will find something related to that title along the video segment and number. Again, roll to a certain hour, minute, second, copy the time, and paste it here in the comments with your questions about that specific time you want to know more about. Easy breezy. I will leave some key points in the time description, so you can get used to this format, which will have a specific playlist in my YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, please check the playlist section in my channel, as well as my community tab, and type your ideas or anything that is 3D related in there. It could be Blender, 3D, VFX, stylized video games, movies, Forbes economy reports, I don't know, you name it, as long as you are respectful to the community and the general theme of the channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more technical details about the things I do between softwares. Alrighty then, it's on with the questions. The first question says, my boss has challenged me to defend Blender in comparison to 3D Studio Max. Also, are there any big studios out there which use Blender professionally? Okay, regarding this question, it could be probably something that I'm picking up in the wrong way, but just as the question is stated, you know, like my boss has challenged me to defend Blender. Okay, that's a wrong approach to anything you will do in life. You don't have to defend anything as long as whatever you're doing proves itself worth using or worth speaking about. How can we say this better? You don't have to challenge another person like prove your text law is the correct one, okay? It's not a challenge. The law is being created. It's there for everyone to reference. And we are going to launch this conversation, or rather this topic, in reference, in context. Because whatever thing you are seeking to create or do or animate or produce in 3D will undoubtedly have to be done in a 3D software. It doesn't matter if it's Blender, Modo, Lightwave. I've seen great work in 2020 created in Lightwave. I mean, really awesome content, and it doesn't have to be just because it's Lightwave, you know, it doesn't have to be just because it's Modo. Of course, there are some differences between softwares because some softwares are specialized in certain area than others. That's what it makes worth paying license in the case of private software, or in case of the open source world to try it out because the community is larger. Okay, I want you to picture this in an adequate spotlight, okay? So the more an open source software has a community built around it, the better. Why? Because open source by its nature, by itself, has the collaboration of many different people who really want to make this software be as extensive or as flexible as it needs to be so that more other people could use it as well. And in the case that you are not doing a contribution to the community, then the software will obviously lack the ability to continue to grow. This is why the approach of the first question, it's a bit difficult to not only react but to answer appropriately, because in the moment that a challenge is presented, I don't know if this is a paraphrase or not, but let's just say it is because that's the way it's written, and I'm sorry, but I cannot, over extrapolate information that I don't have. But in this case, I've seen, in my own experience, a lot of people who resist to any kind of change regarding their software pipeline. And I can tell you this firsthand because I've been in very different positions throughout the years as a junior, as a TD, as a director. different stages in my career have shown me advantages one over other field. And of course, this person would like some help from the community as well. So to straightly answer this, the correct approach would be that it would most likely be valuable if that person approaches to, in this case, Blender, to the open source software, not with a mentality of hey, I challenge you to do this like so, and then you can prove me you're right. No, that's the wrong approach in anything, not only on 3D. I mean, please, if you're talking about cars and you come with this approach, you will miserably fail with whomever you're trying to make this conversation go well. It will not go well. If you're a woman, or if you're a business man or a businesswoman, and you go to another company and go like, proving your phone lines are better than ours. I mean, it's a phone line. You'll have to use it to dial up whatever you want to dial up to, or your phone carrier. As a matter of fact, if you, of course, there is competition. I don't want to get this theme too far, but you get the general idea. If you do not approach with a mentality of expectation instead of challenging, instead of competition, and not in a healthy way, then it's obvious that you're not going to get your full advantage when you meet whatever other qualities this other software may offer you or not, because you already come in a enclosed idea that this software has to challenge, So basically, this is psychology 101. You do not want to go into that zone ever. So don't fall under the trick or under the illusion that a challenge is going to be won by your arguments, because it will not. As soon as the word challenge appears, it is obvious that someone has to win and someone has to lose. So don't fall under that. What you can do instead is to try to invite the person or the other party to consider some of the major points that your software or your company or your service has, because that's the way a healthy community or a healthy approach to this kind of new tools in 3D will serve better the purposes of whatever the company of where this guy is working at will do. Like, for example, let's say that he works in a car design industry, and that he needs, his CADs, like CAD. They need their CADs done in a specific manner with specific measurements and all of that. And then you will come to Blender. Of course, you're going to get some advantages and some disadvantages. But overall, if you show the final visualization process, you will probably think, all right, so Blender does have real-time qualities to this. And maybe if we can, create a pipeline around quickly visualizing that, probably the team can create something in this software, then send it to the other software. And finally, we can real-time visualize it over Unity, or sometimes we can use Blender for quicker and faster deliveries. I don't know. But if you show the advantages, if you show where the other party could benefit in their pipeline, I think that is the right and correct and healthy approach to anything you can do with the software or with your service or with your, with your product in general. That way you can build respect. And that's the first thing you really want to do here. Because if you're in a conversation where there is no respect, where there is no consideration, where there is not an advantage point in regarding what the necessities of the other parties are, then you're playing against the odds. You're playing against defense, and that's not what we want. What we want is that the other party, in this case, the one that is challenging to prove that it's better than 3ds Max, the other party needs to lay down the weapons and, just come to an agreement where he can openly say, okay, we have a pain point here with 3D Studio Max, or we have a pain point here with this kind of workflow that we're having on this other software, or with this kind of approach that we're having. How could this open source software serve, to bridge the gap? I mean, is there anything that this open source software can help us to bridge the gap. And in the case that you're an already established 3D studio, which already has created all the pipeline, then it is obvious that this question is going to be, way out of the context, because you don't need to implement something that you already have implemented and tested out, and it works. But sometimes, and just sometimes, I'm not saying this is the norm, but just sometimes, probably they would consider, it's 2020, we're growing on this, and it's most likely that we're kind of wanting to have a plan for the next 5 years. How are we going to do this? I mean, do we approach the company that we have bought this software, and what are the plans to implement better functions? I mean, I need to know their development road so we can know what to expect in the next 5 years. Okay, that's someone, or that's a company. That's a TD work. Most of the guys that I know work for VFX companies, and if they are in charge of the technical direction department, they make sure that they have the flexibility to build upon that 3D software more tools, more additions, more add-ons, plugins, if you can say it so that they continue to grow and expand their current tool sets, like develop a hair stylist tool, just code it and implement it on your 3D software. That's cool. And I think that's the realistic approach in every question whenever they do put it on the table and say, show me that your open source software can be extensive as the one that I'm paying on right now. Because this is not a deal where you can pay much or pay less. Because in reality, what it is about is whether you can grow or develop on top of that free software. That's what I meant. And if you cannot grow at the necessities of your studio, it is obvious that you're not going to consider that software to be implemented in a pipeline. I'm sorry. And you do not have the entire workflow completed. It is obvious you're not going to choose it for that. But instead, if you're a quick-paced environment, and this is a huge difference, please, people, if you're listening to me right now, please put this with pinpoints on the top of your leaderboard. Okay? Yeah, leader, like when you're playing video games, leaderboard. Put this on top. If you're a fast-paced environment, such as video games, such as TV commercials, such as motion graphics for news or for, quick product presentations, it is obvious that what you want to do is to have more integration with the rest of the team. And if your current software does that, and does it in a way that you are really harvesting on time and really getting your results as quickly as you want, then I don't see any kind of problem with implementing another kind of software that can do the same and also deliver on the same top level results. Additionally, and incidentally, if the new software, to be understood, the open source software, can also build its own pipeline in generating the video or the animation or the 3D asset, whatever it is, then it's worth trying because of the size of the community. That's all I am going to say. I'm not going to say this is a better tool than that one. This tool has not this other function that this other software has, because it is not about that. It is about how much you can put into the software. And why is this? Because it is open source. It means that whatever function you want to implement inside the code, you can go on, open it up, make questions about it, and no one will tell you, hey, you should not be digging into that piece of code or whatever, just plainly rejecting you. It will not happen because we have understanding that the general public license will allow you for modifications, and you cannot take advantage of other people who really need that function implemented and then not tell anyone about it. It cannot be considered a secret, if we can use that word. because it's built around a community. That's the only thing I really want to make clear on this video, because just like I said, to summarize, because this has been a long answer already, to summarize, the larger the community is to implement more code into the open software, the better it is for you to have support from the community itself directly, because they know the software better. And onto the other side of the scales, and if you're a studio with an already established pipeline and you are getting quick results, even quicker than any other software competitors out there, then it's just fine to continue in that business model for as long as it sustains itself. But please have an acquaintance that all models, if they continue, especially in technology, if they continue to be in constant delay, expansion every so and so months or every so and so years, it is destined to not grow. I can cite a lot of EL software in my case specifically with Softimage, and it had a pretty amazing community up until this day. We are all like comrades. I don't think there's many people that, or many artists rather, that will not know each other, because back from that day, back from that time, we were already responsive. We were already building this helpful online resources so that we can do our jobs, because it's already hard to be on a studio, try to put the entire day into any kind of work that we are doing, and then get awful results or finding the software bugs. I mean, I don't think anyone in 2020 would like to have that kind of life. I think that everyone in 2020 would like to have an easy to create, an easy how can we say this, workflow in 3D as easy as it can be. But if you're working with something and then you're switching modes and then you get a bug and then you have to work around that bug and it goes wrong, then all the production stops and we're getting bottlenecks. And again, this depends really on what environment you're coming from. So if this person is coming from an archivist field or business, then I can understand that he is being challenged for the 3D tools. So in addition, and to quickly answer the question, I would most likely recommend this person to have just 2 or 3 specific ready production cases where Blender has already been successful, and also where Blender is creating a new market opportunity for anyone who enters it to grow. Like, for example, this specific year 2020, has been a year where I cannot say predict, but we were looking at the tendencies later on in 2019, where the virtual avatars will be a grand demand market. Okay, and that has been true to a certain point. And even now, where we're doing everything, with social distancing and all, people have been recurring to avatars. The virtual YouTubers, as we can see, have been growing consistently, although not as quickly as the predictions were saying last year. But they have been consistently growing. So I guess in a matter, if the open source software, not specifically Blender, but any other open source software that has a big community, another community not like Blender, but maybe some other 3D application or maybe some other open source software is growing, then that community could have developments that help the workflow, help the general pipeline. Just this past week, I read about Loop, which is a new service created by time-lapse, who is the studio, or rather one of the branches of the studio that created this Netflix movie, very famous, Next Gen, and that was entirely Blender in version 278. It wasn't even the Blender that we know and have today. It was a very limited tool at the time if you just directly downloaded it. But because of the studio's specialized people made specific tools for it and then implemented later, they created the movie. And then they saw that Blender was missing some key points and decided to implement them themselves. Later on, opening up the code and then committing it to the general code. And that's exactly what makes the Blender community big and strong, is that whosoever becomes part of the community immediately knows that, they can try the software, they can see if it fits their needs, they can see if they can find information that will help them get where they want to go. And sometimes it's a general requirement and it's no trouble to guide them. And other times it's a specific requirement from the studio. And I'm saying this from the as a Blender Foundation trainer. I've come to see and meet other people who are working for other professional branches such as TV production, media news, and publicity agencies mostly. And they just come and then say, okay, this is Blender, I see what it can do, thank you for showing me, now how can I implement this in my everyday work so I can work faster and easier. Because ultimately it doesn't matter if it's CorelDRAW 3D or if it's, I don't know, Electric Image 5050. It doesn't matter if it's a multi-zillion polygon brush or a very awesome multi-layer vector software. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is how could this make my life easier? And if it's not going to make your life easier and you have a very steep and difficult learning curve, it is obvious that you're going to need formal training for that. Because the problem is not the software. The problem is the mentality in which we approach the software. Like, for example, and this is something I have been always wanted to tell you. If you're listening to this point, thank you so much. Thank you for being a subscriber in my channel. This is something that you're going to take and you're going to make a big time around it. Whenever you whenever you approach a new software, please do not open the software at first, at a glance. Don't. You will get frustrated. And I want to explain this from a psychological and from a professional, and also from a principles of design point of view. Okay, so let's start. You open up for the very first time a new user interface. And it's obvious that at the topmost part of the screen, you will always have your file, edit, and then all the other menus that can follow so that you can do your usual works. For example, opening a file, importing a file, and that's like common sense, all right? That's what user experience is meant to do whenever a user designer, user interface designer creates an interface. So you open the software for the very first time, you see a daunting cascade of buttons and letters and titles and icons that you do not recognize. It's a big mistake to try to create something advanced at the first try. You will not do that. Even if you have 50 years in 3D Studio Max or Maya and you go to, I don't know, let's say any CAD program, any CAD application, any SolidWorks. All right, let's go with that. That works. If you're a Maya user and then you go to SolidWorks, do you know the amount of icons that software has? do you even know what the specialization of that software is and what it's good for? I mean, why do technicians and artists that use SolidWorks cost by the hour what they cost? You do not know. Probably because you have not seen where this tool excels. All right? So I'm just going to quickly put you in context here because SolidWorks is used through a lot of industries and real, how can we say this? Real big industries to design anything from, I don't know, Lego toys all the way up to turbines for airplanes. Okay, SolidWorks, it's the monster. But if you go with this attitude that, hey, I challenge you to show me how SolidWorks can defeat my 3D software, like I said before, you're not gonna get very far. Imagine that same context for buying a car or inviting a couple to go out. Like, if you're a guy inviting a girl, for example, or if you're a girl inviting a guy, approaching anyone in that context will put you in a bad light. You do not want that. So anyway, SolidWorks. So what it's happening is that this mentality is blocking you from getting the best out of that software. But if instead you approach the software and then ask, hey, what are the industries that you are tapping on right now? What are the industries that are demanding this kind of workflow? You see that it's a very different approach. And then you both mutually get benefit on the answer. It doesn't matter if it's a small answer or a big answer. It doesn't matter if it's a small segment of the market or a big segment of the market. It's going to work for you because you have approached the problem or actually the issues between the difference of both softwares with a correct mentality. Okay. And you may wonder, okay, why is Pierre Schiller talking to me like if he was a marketing genius? Okay, I'm not a genius on any area. I don't claim that. What I do claim is what my profession has taught me all throughout the years and all throughout the many different positions that I've been into, and either directing talent for a production like a movie or something, commercial advertisement, video game production, and I've been around many different fields. I don't know if it's a problem or not in me, but I don't tend to show all the tail feathers. I think it's called the expression. I don't like that. What I like is to demonstrate whatever thing it's happening at the moment or the technical issue is happening at the moment and then solving it in the spot. That's what I like to do. And obviously that's what a technical director does in any kind of situation in the studio. Whenever a rig is broken or you need to develop some solutions for liquid flows, etc., and a long etc. I will not go into details. So to answer correctly this question again, a good practice would be to invite this person. I don't know if it's the direct boss or someone that it's in a hierarchy higher than him, but the friendly approach, or rather the beneficial approach to all of this would be, show me some pain points in our current workflow or something that you would like to enhance or something that you would like to embrace to create better, to create faster or quicker, something that is causing us trouble or making us lose money. Because the keywords here ultimately, and I'm sorry to put this boldly, like it's something strange, but it's reality, is that if it makes money, then we want it. It's that simple. If it's not tapping into that area, please, just like get it away. And one of the benefits, like I already mentioned, that Blender has, it's the continuous development held through different methods. The very first method to make this tool better every day is through the implementation of the official code to the Blender from the Blender Foundation, which is in constant grow with new developers and new tools for Blender. And they get sponsored by these other big companies, big tech companies, because it's a foundation. It's a Blender. It's called the Blender Foundation, and that's how they open up the code so that these other big companies may use Blender as a tool. For example, NVIDIA gives sponsorship directly to the Blender Foundation to develop better tools to render. For example, AI denoising and quicker access to the CUDA cores by their CUDA libraries. And Intel, for example, has implemented Embry code into Blender so that they can use the new processors and they can compute physical approaches in real world environments or real world simulations, physics, liquids, instances, and many other things. And I could talk about many other big time industries such as Unreal Engine, like the company, it's called Epic Games. You probably heard about it. And those kind of companies give full support financially and through the code, new tools that they can directly implement inside Blender because of its open source nature. So the question at the end that he has is, it's very clear in that. Are there any big studios out there which use Blender professionally? It seems that there is this general idea that a 3D software can only work for studios, but it is obvious that the 3D industry, it's huge. And I mean really huge. It can be used anywhere from NASA's flight simulator, which is Blender is used for some of the simulations there, to create designs in other industries. I personally have seen orthodontists use Blender to recreate a dental scans completely and then adapt and create and sculpt even some of the dental pieces back for corrective purposes, for aesthetical purposes, and jewelry, that goes without saying, and many other fields such as automobile pre-visualizations and stuff. So Blender is very widely and openly used. And the best thing about this is that the license will not have a the GPL, the General Public License, does not have an expiration date, does not have an expiring date. So as long as everything you do with it, it's between the boundaries of what is legal to create, then it's basically yours. I seriously make a kind invitation to you today to go to your EULA, your terms of use of the license of the software, whatever software you're using, and please, really, I beg you, take a look at each of the points that EULA has, please. And please consider making the consultations, the respective consultations here in the channel. I'm here to help you. If you don't understand something, you can clarify it under, I don't want to say this, but under the US laws right now, because of the trial that the Facebook had, the Facebook company had, every EULA statement has to be in a clear, human, readable, everyday people language. That is cool. That is awesome. We didn't have that before. Anything that belonged to the technical companies had to be explained in this technical, I will say jargon, but it's not, but I will use it for the example. This technical jargon that, for most people, they don't understand it. I mean, there are quite a few people who who is their work actually to understand these kind of things, especially technical direction. And that's how they advise what kind of software can be implemented between the pipeline, between studios even, to share assets. I don't know if you remember, but there was a time where QuickTime prohibited Flash. They used to use QuickTime technology. And there was a time where QuickTime said, hey, no more of this. I mean, if you're going to use QuickTime technology inside Director, Macromedia Director, then you're going to have to pay us some more royalties. And the same happened when the MP3 wars started. The MP3 codec. Nowadays we can look back and just laugh about it, but back in the day you could not have MP3 technology if you didn't pay some certain royalties for the singer or for the company that developed the algorithm. And that's why we had the MP2 and later on the OGG files. And when it went OGG, that's when it really exploded. It proved that an open source file format could defeat these companies. And I'm not saying that we're going to defeat anyone. I'm just placing these as historic examples of how demand versus benefits came to society, and the rest is history, literally. So again, please, whenever you find someone that approaches to you and just challenge you straight on, just walk away from that conversation. Nothing good is going to come out of that. You're going to waste your energy. You're going to waste your time. You do not want to do that. You want is to just present the facts and let people decide. That's what I always try to do. But then when they take it personally, like, hey, you're gonna break our pipeline. You're saying that your software is better than ours. Then that's the best red flag you can ever get. And so you can just leave the conversation, because no matter what you're going to do, you're not gonna fix it. This person or this guy or this girl is already determined to not listen to you or any of the possible solutions that you can bring onto the table so that they can have more money. I mean, they don't want to listen to it. So it's a lost battle already from the beginning. So to answer quickly, again, this is the 5th time, I think, and I'm sorry to expand this. But my 3 suggestions would be: invite the other party to show the pain points in their workflow or in their pipeline. Talk about how big the community and supportive the community is. That's a better than being alone or. And also try to tell how much of the training material is already out there. And last but not least, try to mention how many big companies are already, backing and endorsing Blender Foundation. So this is not something that just appeared out of nowhere. The Blender Foundation has already, 18 years, 19 years already going on, and each time growing and growing with their development team and their implementation of codes, innovative tools. Right now, the most amazing thing that is happening in Blender, inside Blender, it's Grease Pencil and their sculpting tools by the artist Pablo Dobarro. You can search for him in Twitter. He posts there often. And his implementation are basically, everyday use for the tools. What problem do you have? I want to solve it. And then he creates the tool. It's just amazing. And then he expands the code later on to all other areas that can be compatible. And for that, sometimes big changes in the codes are required. Some others are quicker. But, it takes time. Anything that is computing related and programming, it's going to take time. So this particular video that you're seeing here, the completion of the workflow for the MacPie animation and creation, was first tried with the retopology and creation in Blender. Okay, sculpting and retopology in Blender, and later on I brought it here to Softimage, and that's what you're seeing right now. So I'm grooming the hair, and I wanted to create this feathery looking hair in the beak, which is a region where these kind of animals have their short, where they have these short hairs, which, if I'm not mistaken, it is used to smell. Yeah, unbelievable. They do have their nostrils, but also these little hairs around the beak help the bird geolocate, smelling, and sense temperature rise or falls. You know, like when they go up or down. And I guess this is their radar system as well, along with the one that they have inside the beak. And when I mean the beak, I mean the entire skull, because as you know, the beak is attached to the skull, right? You know how bird skulls are. Anyways, yes, Mr. Schiller, I don't understand why now you're talking like a biologist, because you seem to be only a 3D artist who's interested in marketing and, you know, design and good rules for user interface. Well, sir, I got news for you. There is more than the eye can see. And I graduated as a biochemistry bachelor back in the day, and so let's just say I can understand reading the back instructions of the components for medicine, and that I like animals very, very much. So let's just leave it at that. All right, so in the next section that you're seeing here, I'm going to groom the hair or the body feathers. And I am also going to go for the next question. If you have been following me up to this point in the video, thank you so very much. This video is 3 hours long. I will not be talking the entire 3 hours. I just wanted to, you know, share with you some of the approaches that we can have for this kind of questions and this kind of inquiries. Also, if you have any kind of inquiries specifically regarding this video, you can copy the minute, the hour, the minute, and the second, and then paste it down in the comment section and ask your question. Like, for example, like, what kind of math expressions did you take or use there in your example? And then I will go and check it out to answer you. All right, let's go to the next question then. So I'm not calling anyone's names because obviously we want to protect this guy's identity. I did ask him if I could talk about this a year ago, and then he said it was okay and that he was interested in listening to the results. So here I am going to share this video later on, but his identity he did not want to reveal. So I will keep that as private. Let's go for the next question. And the next question says, hey guys, I am an advanced beginner in Blender and actually trying to achieve more skill. I booked a few courses on Udemy and watching YouTube videos and also material from Blender Guru, CG Masters, etc. According to that, is there any roadmap for 3D artists? The 3D world is huge, lighting, rendering, texturing, etc. And I just don't want to lose my focus on photorealistic architectural renderings, which is what I do for my company. Okay, so we had an ArcViz guy, yes, and he's using Blender and he has a lot of context for learning the tools that we have inside Blender. And this brings me again to the first initial point which I stated. Whenever you approach a software, do not open it and try to use it at once. What you really need to do, and this is what I mentioned before, I'm sorry I skipped through that section. I wanted to mention this. When I usually try to learn a new software, I would always watch an entire week or an entire month of videos and materials, read through books, anything related to that kind of software, and I will not touch the software, and I bid you to do the same. Whenever you try a new software, it could be, I don't know, any 3D software, any word processing software, any kind of, I don't know, you name it, video editing tool, whatever. try not to directly approach the software. Try first, the first week at least, or the second week at least. Try to watch videos and keep in your head, keep in your mind whatever you saw there, whatever you saw in the video, whatever workflow you saw on the video. Try to keep it in mind, okay? Try to retain it in your memory. And then later on that week, or later on those 2 weeks, sit in front of the software, open it up, and try to do exactly the same. Therefore, you will bring your long-term memory back into use. That way, you will not get frustrated. And if you do get frustrated, you will have the context to go back to that book, to go back to that video, to go back to that tutorial that you saw. But right now, you're trying it from your own memory. That's the real expected way to learn. You know, somebody said some decades ago that this generation would have the biggest challenge of all generations, which would be unlearning the things that they have learned and then relearning new information so that they can use whatever means technology brings. Okay, this was said some 40, 50 years ago. It was like a prophecy or something. Because it came to be reality now in our days. We are looking at this kind of generation where, you know, you just pick up your phone or mention a command and Alexa will just answer it straight out. And or Siri or any other AI assistants. Anyways, so you approach the software, you do not open the software, you look for materials around that software, the workflows, the tools, and then later on, 2 or 3 weeks later, you open the software and then start working from memory, from long-term memory. This is going to have 2 benefits. The first benefit is that you're going to make your specific section in your brain work with a long-term memory. That means that whatever you saw, you try to retain it, you try to memorize it, you put to use, I don't want to say it this way, but it is true, the RNA sections of your neurons. All right, Mr. Schiller, you're scaring me. You're talking like a biologist or a scientist. At this point, I'm counting 4 degrees already. Is that why you are called master and stuff? Okay, no, sir. I already mentioned this is exactly why I don't like to peacock feather things, because people, you know, start asking strange questions like yourself. No, the reality is that if I had not chosen the 3D career that I have right now, I would have been a neuroscientist or neurologist. That is why I graduated as a bachelor in chemistry and biology back in my high school. But instead, I chose the 3D animation field and I love it. I really do. All right, let's get back into track. So your long-term memory will serve you after 2 or 3 weeks of exercising, trying to remember what materials, what tools, what specific workflows, where the clicks went inside the UI. Okay? So it's very easy. There's no mystery there. So if you want to really be proficient in some of the software that you know, say, for example, a 2D software, 2D animation like Toon Boom or, I don't know, Toons, whatever you pick, try to watch as many videos as you can. Try to retain that into the memory, into your own brain memory, and then later on, you can even take notes. I mean, there's nothing bad with that. You're encouraged to do it so you can review your own notes. Like, for example, the first thing I always like to do in a first brand new software, anything of any kind, is like, how do I manipulate the viewport? If I don't do that at the first try, then I really, really get frustrated because I feel I have no control, not even on my own viewport. And if you're the same, then I guess you will understand the feeling. You know, it's like driving, it's like sitting in a car and you don't know where the steering wheel is. And you feel that the car goes everywhere except where you want it to go. Or if you're in a boat, you don't know how to guide your boat. it's difficult if you don't know the controls to steer whatever you're using, and it's exactly the same here on 3D. So in addition, this guy asked if there is a specific pathway to grow as a 3D artist inside Blender. Well, I can only say that as a trainer, as a Blender Foundation certified trainer, many artists and studios have come up to me and said, we need to form this from beginning to end. How do we put Blender inside this equation? And so I tell them, well, to get those kinds of results, you need certain quantity or quality in the artists. You need riggers, of course. You need, people who are in charge of the textures and shading. And then we go on from there, and they know exactly what they need any other artist to be specialized in. And that's the real way to approach this kind of things. Because if you're going to work only for sculpting and you're not going to 3D print it, then it doesn't matter how many optimizations you do to the 3D model. If you're not going to print it, you're wasting your time. I mean, just throw a zillion polygons sphere and then you're good to go. But if you're going into the 3D printing industry, then it's obvious that you would like to enhance that model as best as you can so that the 3D printer can read it and then can do its job accordingly. So that's in the case of a studio. What about the case where an individual artist comes and wants to form a specific trace path for all of this daunting material that there is? I will speak from my own experience, and I will say that back in the day when I arrived into Blender, most of the people that I know, even now, they were trying these sculpting features very early in the application. Like, I think it was 279 and some branch over there. Okay, so this is another thing I want you to understand about the open source community. We have what we call branches, which is basically the source code, and then something is added and tested thoroughly until it works perfectly. When it works perfectly, then that chunk of code is then submitted to the official repository where the source code lives, and the developers in the Blender Foundation make a review for it. They make a optimal testing period, and that's what happens to that code. And later of a certain time, probably around 1 month or 2 months, it gets finally implemented. So any source code that you download and then you modify it, we call it a branch node or a branch version of the source code. So there was this branch where people would sculpt with enhancements to the tools. This was way before Pablo Dubarro arrived to the scene. And so the people, would just select their tools, create some brushes, custom, palettes around it. And it was awesome. It worked so awesome that I wanted to try it, because at the time I was working with 3D Code and the voxel models that they have there to understand how layering works in sculpting. But I didn't find that approach very friendly, very artist friendly, because I said, how could a layer be additive when I am sculpting, when in real life all I want to do is, just go back this step or go up this step, and I don't want to keep subdividing this until infinity because I need definitions here. So how does it work? It was very difficult for me to grasp the concept. And then I don't remember from where I saw this. Someone in the community put out a course about basic sculpting. I think it was Zach. Oh gosh, I forget his last name. I'm sorry if you're listening to this. But he's an awesome sculptor. And so I thought, hey, if I follow his channel, maybe if I can, get through his videos, I can pick up some of the things that I want to do in the sculpting. So later on, I went to the communities, I went to forums, different social sites, and I started to work and ask around, I wanted to do this. How could I do this? And there were big mysteries for me until I finally got them all solved around, I don't know, I think it was like 2 months or 3 months. This was way before I became an official certified trainer. And I remember writing all the notes, creating a PDF for me, just so I know that whenever I'm doing sculpting, I should, trigger this command or do this combination to get, the keyboard working for me in whatever thing I was sculpting. So I think it was a process all around 6 to 7 months when I already got the grasp of doing sculpting. I still think that I need to keep on learning more techniques in sculpting, but in general, I felt that 6 or 7 months were like the basic mark to already, present models decently for production or retopology, where they can say, okay, this has shapes, this has appeal, and it works. Back at the time, I remember also, and this was the very first time when I heard tangent animation, be live. It was at the Blender conference of 2017, I think it was, or 16, if I recall well. I guess it was 2016, because I saw Blender 278 already producing next gen for Netflix. And you can see that conference, it's on the Blender website, as well as the Blender playlist in YouTube, the official BCon. You can search for that, BCon 2016, and you will find it. And I think Jeff, I forget his last name, is a founder of the company, one of the co-founders of the company, and he used to work on Maya, the very first versions of Maya. And when I heard that, I said to myself, all right, so we have someone inside Blender who really knows what he's doing. He was way back when even Softimage, which was my primary software, was created, and he even knows the story on how this all began, because I got the chance to ask him in one of the communities some very deep inside stuff about Softimage and Maya, and he answered them everything. He answered all of the questions, and I was like amazed, like, okay, so we heard community and he's developing his tools. I guess Blender is going to go somewhere after all this. And sure enough, later on, 2 years, I became a certified trainer. And here we are, showing the people how to make better use for this. So in addition, and to answer this question, I would say to this person that the best thing that he can do is to trace his own path. Because if he's working for ArcFish just to pay bills and he's not satisfied with that, then he needs to be sincere with himself and try to target himself to another market where, it's going to be more meaningful for him. For example, if he loves video games and he really, really wants to make the next iconic 3D character for the next gen video game, right? So let's say, I don't know, I'm just gonna make this up, that somewhere along the line, someone starts sculpting, I don't know, space octopus. No, let's get even weirder, space elephants, all right? And they have to be like the Ninja Turtles, except that their heads are elephants. But they are from outer space and from this specific galaxy where elephants have, I don't know, very advanced spaceships and stuff. So he needs to be honest with himself and say, okay, where does the pipeline start? The pipeline starts at character concepting. So if you don't get a character concept approved, which is drawing, which is 2D, which is, sit there with Photoshop, Procreate, Corel Painter, I don't know, Paint, you name it, you're not going to get any far. Because you need to have this concept solid, grounded, you put the foundations in, the appeal, the look, the silhouette, the shapes. And if it works, then you're on to the next stage. But if this person, it's really drawn to, I don't know, let's say vehicle design, like cars, like ships, like, I don't know, airplanes, then it's obvious that the concept is still king, but now he will have to deal with pieces and motor parts moving, joining. Probably he just wants to design the chassis, but in either, or the outer shell, but in either case, the workflow starts where you want to end. If your means to end is to create something for transport, it is obviously going to be a vehicle. And if your means to end it's, I don't know, entertainment, and you want to specifically address the niche of the video game area, then of course you're going to go for that at the beginning, obviously character creation. So anything you want to do, you are going to be part of a specific part of the timeline of the pipeline. But if you are considering to create the complete workflow, the complete pipeline from beginning to zero, to zero to end from the beginning, then you better consider the industry where you're walking into. Because, for example, in the VFX industry, I used to, when I was a junior, I used to think, I want to make movies, I want to be part of the crew, I want to go here and there. But when it got real, when I was really there, and the crew really invited me, hey, do this, do that, go sit with the photography director of photography, go there, help him out with this. My gosh, I learned so much from talking, just relaxed talking with the guy for 10 minutes than what I had learned 10 years since I finished high school doing this. 10 minutes, because the guy would just go, like if you're working in a wide lens angle with this kind of lighting, you should set your ISO in this manner here and there. And I was so amazed. I didn't even know what he was talking about, but I was taking notes, which is what I recommend this person to also do. Whatever industry you're interested, whatever goal you're pursuing to achieve, you should have notes. You should have a mentor. You should look for someone who's already doing the thing that you want to do. And you ask, obviously, not in a very rude manner or antisocial. You ask him or you ask her, hey, you know what? I admire your work. I really think that you did amazingly on this and that character or this or so movie. And I was really impressed by this little detail, I don't know, on the light. And I really would like to know how you created such an incredible effect. Now, depending on the way you approach the guy or the girl or the director in general, you're going to get a cute answer, which is, just, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And, well, we did it with 18, and that's it. You're going to get a very detailed answer. Like I just mentioned before, well, we put the camera lens here. We use this some this kind of light there, and then we connected this to that, and that's how we made the effect. Or you could get a banal answer like this one. All right, thanks. That's it. So just like I mentioned before, depending on how you are approaching this person, be humble, try to be friendly, of course, and don't be over cocky. That's another thing that really, really stressed me out when I passed from a middle director to a senior director. I learned, or rather I encountered many different artists who they thought they were rock stars. I mean, they didn't have the word humble in their dictionary. And they were very cocky. And I have to admit, I was one of those guys way back then. But then I got to meet really stressful situations in my different jobs. And I understood, we are all part of a team. I cannot think that I am the only one hero who's going to make the touchdown. I can't. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. At least in movie making, you're part of an entire community. It could be a little, it could be a big community, which is called the studio. If the studio doesn't win, you don't win. And it's simple as that. And if you don't pass the torch, or you don't pass the ball to another player whenever you're having troubles, or whenever you need help and you do not ask for help, then the entire pipeline gets delayed, right? It is true that some studios, put a lot of pressures, put a lot of grinding hours into the artists, and even so, the artists, try to compete between themselves by who's staying longer in the studio than the others. And it's healthy to a point, but not all the time. I don't know if you can understand that kind of presentation there, but it is not healthy to be, bashing other artists all the time. It is healthy when it's, someone that you really know, he's your friend, and, you go challenge. In that sense, it's good. You go challenge and, try to make your best work, but you still are buddies. You still are friends. And it's okay because, it's like that long time friend that you always have. But if you're in a very competitive arena, such as the 3D world, and then you are not humble, you do not know your place inside your team, then of course you're going to get bashed out pretty quickly. I've heard a lot of TDs and a lot of recruiters say that if you don't have the right attitude to learn inside the studio, it doesn't matter how many years you have in experience, you will not get the job. And it's true. I can tell you right away, right up front, it is true. So the best thing you can do is to ask humbly, like for example, Mr. Schiller, I am noticing that you're putting a very complex math equation there, or math expression there for the wings. Where did you learn that? Well, back in the days, there was something called digital tutors. I think if you've heard of it, then you are in our leagues. But if you have not heard of it, it's something like Pluralsight. I think it was later called. It's the Udemy of back in the day, right? And digital tutors had this specialized course where they showed how to create wings in Softimage. And so I picked up that course. I jotted down the equations for the wings. And, I thought many years ago, this would be useful someday. And I remember having them placed in a text file, which I specifically put inside a big name folder so that I will always find it. And gladfully and thankfully, that has served me through the years. And this project in particular, after many years, I think it's after what? It would be the 2002. Yeah, after almost 18 years, I've came to use this formula. And you may ask, well, if you're already a Blender certified trainer, why did you go from Blender to Softimage to complete this project? Well, it was because at the time, as you saw already, Blender 279 did not have some of the tools that I was looking for. And it was still, implementing some of the stuff that I would later need to export this model. And obviously rigging is one of the things that whenever you do something like that, it will stay on the software where you created it. It will not march onto another software unless you bake it or export it as an Alembic file or write in our days as a USD file. So there are differences and there are methods and there are methodologies that, you have to pick up your battles. And when I mean battles, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean it in a good way. Like, you take something, deliver it, and that you go there, work, and deliver. And since I already have a master's 3D degree in 3D production in Softimage, specializing in Softimage, I decided, just sit and stand to deliver. In Softimage, you sit to work and stand to deliver. That's what it is. So back in the day, I also found out that Cycles was implementing their first speed ups from NVIDIA, but it took too much time until it arrived. So I decided to just, go back to Softimage and work it from there. So Cycles right now at the moment is still implementing their speed algorithm, and it's awesome. It's good. But right now, as today of June, if you're listening this in this year, June of 2020, I recently downloaded the Octane rendering engine for Blender. I don't know what version that is. I think it's 282, which is the version that I'm currently using because right now I'm working on some projects. And the only limitation I think it has is only limited to one GPU, one graphics card. So if you have one graphics card or you have a bridge, the SLI bridge, it will not work with your secondary GPU. It will only work with one of the GPUs that you select. So I still have to install it, go through their manual instructions, check out all of the nodes that it has there. I haven't touched Octane like for what's that, like 10 years now. There was this ArcViz project that I was invited to way on back the days, and the guys were really amazing. These were two German guys, two architects who came up to the studio where I was working at the time. And one of them said, we were working with Octane, and here's our version, our renders, because I asked them, if you want to do a 3D walkthrough of this place, this building that you're presenting here, I need to have some base renders. I don't know if it's going to take you all night to render or not, but just give me one so I can know what the materials look like and then recreate that with your CAD data and, recreate everything in our softwares. Back at the day, I was working with 3D Studio Max, so I had some artists under my wings as a technical director, where I could just tell them, okay, we got this project with this ArcViz project, and the guy wants us to make a walkthrough, through the building and some views. So we imported the project. It took around 1 hour and something minutes. And all the materials were blank, obviously. It was created in Octane, and I think it was a Sketchfab. No, not a Sketchfab. It was some other kind of software. I don't remember exactly, but it came from an ArchiCAD, I think it was. Yeah. So we did some transmutations of files, and this is to put it bluntly, until we finally, created the entire model inside. So the next day I go and say, hey, we have this, and this is the wireframe overview that we're going to do. And then he presented me the render from last night done in Octane. And that was like the very first time I saw Octane's potential. Later on, when Marmoset came to the market, I always thought, they inherit some of the code, of the real-time code that they were implementing in the material dev and look from Octane, but I was wrong. There were two different companies, and later on the years, I think one did something with the other. I'm not going to speculate or say anything about it, but I'm pretty much sure they share some of the algorithms for shading. And of course, then came Blender 2.79b, and then I understood, all right, this is time to make the jump. And so to end this question, because we have already 1 hour and 10 minutes talking, and I sincerely thank you for being this long in the video, and now I will leave you with the rest of the video and the rest of the process. Right now we're doing weights, and as you can see, I'm weighting every single feather of this bird. Now this took around 3 months to create, and you will have this video in 3 hours, so we can summarize and say that 1 hour is equal to 1 entire month. And just for reference, I had to accelerate the video times 20. Okay, so it is accelerated times 20, the entire workflow. And this is all that my hard drive could take in, as in recording. Like my screen recording had this limit where I cannot record 4 hours, 6 hours, because the archive or the file would be so huge. The Windows at the time, which I was using, which was Windows 7, could not handle anything more than 5 or 10 gigabytes of video, I think it was. I don't remember. Windows 7 was so old at that time. And many people have told me, hey, you should move to Windows 10 because it's going to be EOL on 2019. And I didn't want to believe them. I'm sorry, in 2020. And I didn't want to believe them. But ultimately, it proved right, and I had to move on. My entire hardware was built, prepared for that, and thanks God, everything worked out fine. So right now, I'm sharing with you this complete workflow. Of course, it's accelerated times 20, so if you want to be a little bit slower, you can just select 0.1 speed, and then you will get whatever thing you would like to see in the video. And of course, if you have any questions, please don't forget, just copy the hour, the minute, and the second, paste it here in the comment section below, and then ask anything related to the video or related to this conversation that we're having. It's like a podcast. But I don't like to do podcasts. Like, publish audio per se. I like to comment on the video, which is what we're doing with these two interesting questions, which I hope you really have taken a broad view on how to approach them effectively. So in the end, this guy has a lot of courses bought from Udemy, YouTube videos, and also material from Blender Guru, 3G Master, etc. According to that, is there a roadmap for 3D artists? The 3D world is huge, lighting, rendering, texturing, and I just don't want to lose my focus on photorealistic architectural renderings, which I have to do for my company. So it sounds like he definitely wants to go to another niche of the 3D industry, and it's good, it's great. We always have the urge to grow. We always have the urge to continue developing our 3D skills or our artistic assets, in the sense that we have to implement new techniques, new knowledge on the software that we're using, or ultimately joining another team who's already doing what we love. For example, I learned way back in the day, I'm sorry to bring all of this way back in the day mentions, but it is true. I guess before the social media era, we had a lot to do in personal conversations like email, letters, phone calls. It was a very different era. Right now, if you're in the industry and you do not have a ArtStation portfolio or Behance portfolio or Vimeo or YouTube channel, then you are not going to be known by many. But instead, if you promote that in Instagram or on Twitter, you have more social reactions, which is another question that has not been asked here specifically in this video, but I would like to talk about. I'm going to leave the description down here so you can get the pinpoint on this entire conversation so that this will not overflow your hearing. And if you're working in 3D or animating or writing at the time of you seeing this video or listening to this video, thank you very much. I am really happy for your support. Please share this video if you find something useful, as long as it's beneficial for you as an artist. So way back in the day, I found out about this gaming studio who was using Softimage, and they wanted to do this, how could we say it? I'm going to put this bluntly, sort of a lookalike League of Legends game, except it had different stats, different roles, which help you grow from different tasks until you completed your level points experience. And it was a very interesting game. I don't know what made them go into that niche, but back in the days, League of Legends was just starting out, and I saw them, like a real very artistic approach to creating characters for that kind of gameplay. And it was awesome. And it was created in Softimage. So I wrote an email to one of the guys who was working there. And I asked him politely, I really admire your work. This character in particular is doing something here and there. Did you use bones, stretchy bones, like so and so? And so he was very kind and he answered and replied, what kind of things he did, but obviously he would not tell the entire workflow. Otherwise, he would be revealing company secrets. But he was very kind and he said, you can almost get this result if you try this and that and here and such. So I thanked him, and therefore I saw that later in the years, most of the people, when Softimage EOL stroke, and we had to look for another new software, most of these people migrated from Softimage to, for example, Cinema 4D, for example, Houdini. Most of the community, the Softimage community, who were TDs at the time, migrated to Houdini. And I guess they're doing awesomely because that software is just amazing. Thinking procedurally, it's a science of itself. If you think I think weird, try thinking procedurally. That's gonna be a real challenge. So, anyways, what I was saying is that there are certain niches or certain market sections where you should point your talents or your goals as an artist. Okay, I deviated a lot. So again, back to the main question, or rather to the main comment. This artist mentions that he has a lot of Udemy courses, CG Masters, and Blender Gurus courses for Blender. And well, all I can say is that all of that material is very, very well prepared. Except for Udemy, I don't know which specific courses he has. I know that there is one specific course, although he says he's an intermediate beginner Blender user. But I've seen this very, very ranked Udemy course about Blender, which shows how to do the basic things, which shows how to do basic materials. And I've seen the preview. I have not seen the entire content, but I've seen the preview and the reviews and the ranks. It's top ranked. I don't know why. I guess it's because it's the very first one that came out, and he also updates this for some of the parts that it has. So I'm not going to comment about Udemy. I'm going to comment about Blender Guru and CG Masters, which of course are very, very skilled and prepared artists. Of course, Mr. Andrew Price was one of the figures that I first followed in the Blender world, but not in the sense that I wanted to do the donut tutorial. I did not ever have done. I haven't created ever the donut tutorial. The donut tutorial. For funny that might seem. How did I come to know Mr. Price? I came to know him through the Blender conference when he posted something about the user interface. You see, back in Blender 2.78, I was really struggling with the user interface. One of the reasons that I was kept away from Blender for so many years, its redundant and duplicate user interface. What do I mean by that? I had this very close 3D friend who I would always, have conversations about the 3D world and the CG industry in general. And then he is actually a Blender user. He has many years in Blender. And he said to me one day, okay, you should try Blender because we have this and we have that. And then I mentioned to him, okay, yes, I know you have this and you have that function. I'm attracted to Blender because of the Japanese Blender community, and this is the reason why you will listen to Japanese music right now in this video. I really love their support, their techniques. Even back then when Softimage was still a very strong 3D package, many of my most memorable video games franchises were created with Softimage. So I'm really fond of the Japanese CG 3D CG community. Anyway, so they were creating stuff in Blender back in the days, and my friend told me, you should try Blender because we are doing this and we're doing that, such and such with these tools. And then I said to him, look, I kind of like your software, Blender, but it's very redundant. It has so many different parameters in so many different places, but I can find them all not once, not twice, but up to 3 times in the entire user interface. Why do you do that? First. Second, the measurements, and please remember, this was way back on 278, 276, 277, please, okay? I'm not saying this about the today's version of Blender yet that you shiningly have in your PC or your Mac, okay, or your Linux station. No, way back in the day, there were some parameters that I did not, find congruent inside the user interface. So I said to him, the day when you start reviewing or your peer community start reviewing the code to eliminate most of these duplicated commands here and there, and I showed him where they were. And the day that you fix physics here and there using this and that system coordinates and this weights and this speeds and velocities and stuff, and the day that you start arranging these physics parameters like such and such and such, and please bear in mind that I do not come from a self-taught background. I had to go through specialized Master 3D to understand how to create and understand depth, how to create lighting, in the sense to prepare a movie set, and stuff like that. So I had all of this inside Softimage, and of course I was reading a lot of books in 3D from different countries like Germany, France. I really love the French artists. They are like, wow, in 3D Studio Max. Italy, for example, Italy in 3D Studio Max, back in the day, it was like, wow. I mean, you thought of Italy, you would thought of 3D Studio Max. Like everyone used 3D Studio Max back there. But nowadays, it's come to many different users in different countries, and Cinema 4D, Modo even. You can think of all of these indie video game studios in Rome. That's Italy, and France, French studios as well. They are all amazing, and I really admire their work. I had the opportunity, thanks God and to my parents, I had the opportunity to start very young, traveling there and meeting a lot of different cities in Europe, working in some of them. But in all, they really inspired me. Like I was there in Europe, I'm thinking, these guys, they are really pros. I better, learn everything I can as long as I'm here. But not to diverge from the main theme, the main subject. I told my friend, fix this in Blender and I will gladly try it out. But then when I got in 278, the viewport and the mouse control, the right click didn't, just make immediate connection in my brain. And I say this not to, diminish the original workflow, but it wasn't like, I don't know, why do we have to select things with the right click? If all in all, I could use a 4-button mouse, and then I could gladly, put this command right here. But so many functions were hard-coded, and this is the truth. And I just didn't want to make my friend feel bad. But later on, I found out with a very experienced, like 50 or so years programmer, a very good friend. And then I told him, I need to open up this code. They say it's open source. I need to download the resources, and I need to download the repository, and I need to take a look at this code. Can we look it up, please? And then he opened this session, and we both went through the code, because one of my most biggest concern when I came into Blender was if I would ever use Y up and Z forward, because as you know, in Blender, I think it's Y forward and Z up, Z up in Blender, and it's kind of difficult to understand nowadays. And we all went through that kind of trouble, and later on adapt our coordinate systems in our brain, because I think most of the softwares out there, at least the majority, work in a Y up range axis. Of course, there are others who work with Z up. I think Rhino is one of them. I think Sketchfab is one of them. I don't remember the list exactly. But one of the things that got me most away from Blender was the physics system and weights and speed and measurements, and the Y up axis. And this is such that you can understand why you never should talk about this, because this is very deep into the code. This is the only one thing that you cannot ever change, even if you open up the code, even if you create another a clone repository, and even if you would create something like an axis offset coordination, you will not get through this chunk of code, this modules of code, because it's very intrinsical in the system. It's very intrinsical in the program. So Y will never be forward. Y will never be up. It will only be forward. And so that when he opened the software, he told me, if you are thinking that you can change this, or that you can create a function where you can offset this, it is not that easy, because we need to parse some other modules that already have this implemented. And there is no way to offset them, because that would mean that we would have to go through the entire code and rewrite the code at some parts. In other words, whenever we export into FBX, we are getting offset compensations, and that's the way it is. This has been even said by the developers themselves, that it's baked, it's retransformed, it's repurposed. Those axes, they are repurposed when we export into FBX. This is why you have all of those checkboxes, and this is why you have this many options. I will try to do a video about it, because that FBX exporter in Blender is the longest dialogue I have ever seen, ever. Like in 3D Studio Max, certainly you have some dialogue. Like in Modo, you do have some certain, dialogue to get your things through, but they are very linearly. Like they ask you if you want to export this, or your normals, or your materials. I don't know. Simple stuff. But in Blender, it's not like that. So I guess one of these days I need to create one video that goes through all of that in better explanation, step by step, so you can understand and not obviously jump across them. Because some people just say, just tick this box and then export it. But what if you were to understand fully what the exporter of the XPX does inside Blender? Wouldn't that be better? Anyways, now we have other options, which I'm very gladful to the developers, which are the USD, the GLB, and also the Alembic, and it's coming the option to export voxel volumes. So that is being implemented as well. Okay, Mr. Schiller, you seem to have a lot of in-depth knowledge about Blender. How's that? Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, because just like I mentioned before, when I had to become a certified trainer, I had to do a lot of research regarding the software as of how cycles works from the beginning to end, as of how the volumetrics are rendered from beginning to end, and many other technical aspects of Blender. Why? Because when I came from Softimage, I was trying to aim to become a certified trainer in Softimage. I studied a lot of ICE nodes and setups and reroutes and connections and everything that had to do with ICE. Many of you, if you don't know, would probably know that Softimage had a nodal approach, that is to create effects with nodes, a nodal approach to do animation and do VFX. Okay, we could do a lot of stuff. If we could say it politely, our effects editor was very nodal driven. That means that we use nodes to create math equations, nodes to locate particles, nodes to generate particles, nodes to do liquid simulations. Everything we needed mostly was created by someone in the community or directly into the Softimage ICE demonstration files. So you would look at that, you would open that, everything would be commented. Now this is part of good practices for developers. Whenever you create something and you comment it inside the code or inside the shaders, people who would open it will know exactly what the shaders do. And this is the reason why whenever I launch a course, I try to sell it very low in price, but it's not because of the quality that is low. I try to make these courses that can reach a lot of artists who are really starting out or who are mid-experienced and they really, want to get a grasp of what they will have when they create their own very nodes. So this is the reason why good practices make this for the better as a team worker, because whenever someone opens that node, they will exactly know where to change the values. They will know exactly where to change the colors and things like that, or the math equation. As a matter of fact, that's one of the most powerful features that ICE had, that you can create different nodes and group them or create a compound and then expose certain parameters so you can drive additional forces, additional effects. So that is to say that when I came from Softimage into Blender and I wanted to become a certified trainer, I studied a lot of technical aspects that no one else was asking in the community. And those two things, the Y up, the opening the code, the reading along the cycles, engine implementation, and all of that, are just a few examples of all of that I had to go through and learn in order for me to train people and to answer adequately and technically whatever questions they have. For example, if they would ask me something like, hey, why does cycle makes this kind of white firefly in the render? What's going on? Didn't I give enough examples? Well, yeah, there is this other parameter that will control the capping, or rather the limit threshold of the light, so that you don't get those fireflies. I remember that was a big thing back in 278 to 279. And the first implementations of the algorithm in cycles started to get better and better and better. And that was the other reason I finally found like at peace with myself when I finally understood the cycles algorithm. Of course, I don't, tweak parameters much because I tend to think that, the machine can do all of that. If you have enough machine power, then you can have enough render. So I just let, some of the parameters deal with themselves and not try to fiddle around too much, because rendering by itself is all an art department by itself. And you know that. Everyone who's worked with Clarice, anyone who's worked with Bakery, anyone who's worked with, Katana, or even Houdini specifically for render. No, it's a department by itself. So let's just not get into that. Let's just say that in the end, all of the information that I got to prepare myself for that moment to become a certified trainer has helped me answer adequately most Houdini artists, ZBrush artists, 3D Maxers, 3D Max users. I don't want to call them harshly Maxers, but it sounds so cool. Like, you work on 3D Max? Yeah, so you're a Maxer. Like, yeah, that kind of thing. Like, they used to call us softies. So I guess they are called Maxers. Anyways, I mean, I'm just kidding. So in the end, what I mean to say is that when Blender implemented most of the BSDF materials from the Disney papers into Blender, it was that was like the period where I said, okay, this is ready. I feel confident I can jump into this, and let's start porting my entire workflow from Softimage into Blender. Now, this is the specific reason why you will always see me working in a user interface that looks like Softimage. Why? Because most of us, when we migrated back at the day, we had to find another replacement. Literally, it's like that. Another replacement for our software. But it happened that none of their software had what tools we had in Softimage. For example, very early when I started to use other softwares like Modo or 3D Max, I could not conceive in my mind if I wanted an IK change for a two-bone link to create an external or an additional controller, and to name or specify that controller should be the IK handler and the other one should be the root. In Softimage, we don't do that. In Softimage, we do 2 clicks, and depending on how many clicks you do for the bone change, it will automatically handle the IK and the root. Okay, and then you would say, but how? If you have an anchored root and then you had a floating IK handler, then how in the world are you supposed to manage and move that thing in object space or in world space? Well, you continue to parent those things, but you don't have the hassle or the trouble to create 2 additional setups, 3 additional setups, even just to say, this is a 2-bone IK chain. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of many different things that we as 3D artists cannot find in other softwares. This was so much so that some of the artists went to other companies and started implementing some of the techniques and tools that they developed for Softimage into other softwares. I'm not going to say names, I'm not going to say companies, and I'm not going to say add-ons or plugins. But most of you who are in this industry will automatically recognize what are those things and how much advantageous it's for the software that you are using to have inherited these tools from Softimage. So let's just leave it at that, and let's continue with the BSDF implementation of the cycles from the Disney papers, the cycles nodes, and the way it started to react to light. And that was a big game changer for me, because from that day on, it was announced very early in 279 that there could possibly be a real-time previsualization option in the near future. Of course, that became to solidify in Blender 2.8 when Eevee arrived. And from there on, you can already watch in my channel some of the demo experimental versions that I did with using 2.8 experimental Eevee, and how would that shape the future we are in right now. Because real time, it's very important. I cannot picture myself using path tracing or even ray tracing at this stage of life as a professional, because I know that something is even faster and looks even quality perfect whenever you do your things right with probes, with reflections, with shadows, with contact shadows, I mean occlusions, global illumination, subsurface scatter, and all of these assets and all of these properties are calculated in screen space, and that's what makes Blender a very competitive software. Because if you have to create a product visualization, you can have instant feedback, instant render right at the viewport. So there's no more, this client is coming, please hurry up with the render. You know, if you're working in a publicity company and you have a client's presentation, you know, you would just, you know, put your monitor up there. Client would say, I don't know, I don't like that shiny green color. Let's make it, I don't know, shiny red. And then you will have to explain to the client, okay, that's a note. Let's write that down. What other observations do you have? And then the client would go back to their office. You will go back to your renders, try switching that around, send a version or two by the end of the afternoon. You know, everything changed. Ever since we have Blender in real time, everything changed for the better. And now you don't have to wait any longer. You only have to, you know, switch your shader around. You can even customize your shader, like I've shown in the series presented on the Guilty Gear Stylized series. I think it was in part 2. Definitely in part 2. I showed how you can customize the colors and have them live so that your client will see a very short, concise panel, and then he would just switch to the color that he desires or she desires. It's just bing, bang, click, clack, boom, it works. And finally, I can't believe we have spoken around 2 hours now. And finally, one of the things that definitely conveyed me and the others to really make good, awesome use of the real time in Blender was the sculpting section. And to address the previous question about the materials, I met Blender Guru by one of the expositions he gave at the Blender conference about user interface, and he was proposing that Blender should change their user interface. At the time, it was outrageous. You know, people just exploded. They did not want their software to be touched. But things started to change, and now we are all enjoying a nice, amazing UI in Blender. It's fantastic. It works. Anyone who just tries it can be trained probably under 2 hours, and then they can go on their way. It's just fantastic. It's very visual now. It's very clear. It's very readable. Of course, always it can be enhanced, you know, for the better here and there, details here and there. But overall, if you sit in Blender nowadays, you know exactly what you will do with the viewport. You will know exactly what you do with the commands, with the modifiers. Everything is set there, and it just works. So Blender Guru, yes. And later on, because of him and his website, I saw the Cycles Encyclopedia, I think it was. Yes. I remember I studied those materials for around a week, one solid week. For example, I would grab the transparency node, like they explain it there. I would connect it with some other nodes, and then I try another setup, and then another setup, and then raise. Oh my goodness, do I remember that week? Since 3D Studio Max has always been known because of video games and ArcVis, I decided to port a 3D Studio Max ArcVis scene to Blender using the Blender's Guru Cycles Encyclopedia. So I studied those materials, and then I grabbed the versions from 3D Studio Max V-Ray materials, and then I would somehow translate them into Blender by either power, by either color, by either transparency, and many other different factors. I did an entire, huge notes on that. And so I found out how they can be effectively be ported, conserving their energy. I think the most difficult part was the water the water volume. And you can find all of those scenes in my portfolio. Now, if you go there and check them out, you will know what I'm talking about. But that was the very first scene that I translated from 3D Studio Max V-Ray setup into Blender using lights and materials. So when I finally, after 2 weeks of trying here and there, when I finally hit the water shader, and the water shader just worked, and I remember I switched on one of the lights because before collections we had layers. I switched on one of the layers in Blender, and then the light went just dispersing through the water, and then it lost energy as it was traveling the water. And then I said, wow, this finally works. I finally found out how to make this water dispersion work exactly like V-Ray. And anyways, the ArcViz scene was completed, and I wouldn't ever want to do that again. Translating materials from one software to another will never get 100% results. That plainly I would say. But you can get really close. I would say like 96% close. If you know what to dial in, all right? As much as render parameters and, of course, shader parameters. So that's kind of the story there, and how I got to know Octane, how we ported it to 3D Studio Max, how I got to be amazed by real-time and realistic materials, how I got to know about the BSDFR material from Disney, and how I got to know about cycles and Blender Guru. And yes, of course, there is CG Masters and those and CG Cookie as well. I remember after studying the cycles encyclopedia, I found out about CG Cookie because I was working at the time in my own very short 3D animation movie. And it was a very personal project which I wanted to use to say goodbye to Softimage. And I guess everyone in the planet did the same at some scale. Some other big, some other small projects in the world. But we all felt bad that we had to leave our software. And so I wanted to create this very personal project inside Softimage. And at the time, I was looking into the toon shading techniques. Now here's where it all ties in. Here's where it all ties in. Back in the day, Softimage had the best toon shader around. This is not said by me. This is said by every company who had the privilege to work with the software. It was a complete software, a complete shader implementation for ring lights and outlines and strokes and stylize and how you call this, taper lines. There are many parameters inside the master Softimage toon shader, which is why I always have strived to reach that same level outside Softimage. And this is where the GDC conference of 2015 enters into place. Because at the time when I saw that, and I saw the Guilty Gear shader, which was created in OGL, shading language, inside Softimage, made me realize, maybe there will be not something like this ever again. Like, this is done in Softimage, and it's done because of a reason. It's because, the software just works. Nothing out there will be comparable to this if they did it this way, and it's generating as well as the other video game franchises who have always used Softimage. Then that must mean that this shader is it's a great solution. Like, how do I use this outside Softimage? And then I started striving, for a toon shader inside Blender, inside Modo, inside 3D Studio Max has already the best toon shader ever with the plugin Pencil Plus. That, I will say it right in front. It's the best thing out there. So much best that even Unity has it now in 2020, and it's an unbeatable plugin. That thing it's just a monster. It has everything it has to have for a toon production. Pencil Plus. So anyways, outside Softimage, I could not find any other solution. I even tried Modo, and it has some nice shaders. I love it, and that's when I learned about the Monte Carlo ray tracing. I'm sorry, Monte Carlo path tracing. It's amazing. I mean, if it wasn't for Modo, I wouldn't have been drawn into the volume rendering methods. Basically, Modo made me fall in love with volume renderings. It was amazing just to see that viewport instantly come alive with smoke and particles, and it was instant. I totally fell in love with it. But when I came to the animation part, I felt lack of some tools, of speed, memory leaking. This was a very early version, like I think it was 701. Yeah, 701 was my first Modo trial, and I was so excited when the general manager, the general creator, came into a live stream and he was talking about Modo 801, and all the beta testers that wanted to try it, can just directly write to him, and it was amazing. I got part of that. I got part into that, but I did not get the beta trial. Although I did try it when it came out for the 30-day free trial thing, and well, I'm sorry, I diverted from the general topic, and the general topic is how to create a better toon shader. So I was creating this project in Softimage, and later on I realized, okay, if I'm going to move to Blender, I need to create a better toon shader in Blender. So how do I do that? And I started to research, and again, I lent a hand, or rather, the Japanese community lent me a hand, big time, in how to create some of the effects using the toon shader. But then later on came Eevee. Okay, so I had to migrate the few things that I have learned along 279 and 280 into the real-time viewport that Eevee offered. And that was a long struggle, but then I realized, hey, you know what? Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to when the shader was originally created, and let's check out how it was done. Let's try to recreate this step by step. And this is when I realized, all right, so maybe we have something here. Maybe if Softimage just disappeared, it was EOLed, end of life support. Maybe we can port what this software used to do the best and then port it into Blender. So that's why I want to thank you if you have followed me all the way through this time of the video. I really want to thank you for your support. And the series in the Guilty Gear stylized shader in Blender's Eevee viewport has been amazingly well received. I guess people really liked it. I have seen works from other people who are already implementing those techniques into their own workflow, and I'm really happy. And I pretend to go all out on part number 4, the last part, which will be more around drivers, expressions, some stylization in camera. Okay, it will. If you have heard this part of the video, I'm happy because I am telling you right away, it's going to be around the camera movements and animation. There are papers out there, there are presentations, even from the official Arc System Works, which is the game engine house, the software house that, okay, the company that creates Guilty Gear. That's what I meant. Who have released these presentations, this specific PDF about stylizing the character for the camera and for animations, and that's good. But I have not seen anyone in the 3D world, in the CG community, to create more details about that. That is to say that all those presentations are there, you can read them, but if you don't put them in practice, or if you don't see them in a video, you will not know what they mean. So what I intend to do is to grab some of those ideas or concepts directly from the official sources and then adapt them into a video. And that's why I created Fixie, which is a open source character, female character, which has the backstory of being a cyber nurse. Okay, she's trapped in this cyber war in cyberspace, and that's why she has this long, like scissor kind of thing, and but that is a cyber blade. And the effect and all the powers that she's gonna have, she's gonna come fully out on part 4. So by then, I hope that you are really following the series. Right now, we recently released part number 3, talking about the sprites, talking about decals, and many other techniques, even skin shading, which was a not safe for work version. And I had to do that because some of the artists that I know really wanted to know how to stylize a skin, for female characters or for male characters. And I give a thoroughly walkthrough with the Blender tools and with the techniques that you can use to shade and color that kind of stylized skin. Okay, even alien skin and stuff like that, by switching colors, by switching textures. And I guess depending on the people's reaction, on the people's comments, I can, expand on that subject, like creating other kinds of a skin. But that will have to wait until, proper feedback is given. So to complete this, the tool shader that was developed was acquired from the techniques of the Guilty Gear series. That is why when I first released the part number 1, I was specifically going after the vertex paint method, because there are 4 different methods to the stylized shader. I'm gonna tell you, because you've been, I don't want to say it this way, but loyal to this recording. Thank you for following me and digging up this inside this audio. So the 4 techniques are: number 1, vertex paint. If you use that as a factor, then you can divide the light from the shadows. Okay, so whenever you separate your red channel, that is going to be your light, and whenever you separate your blue channel and whatever that is painted, it's going to receive your lights. And for that, you need to create a factor threshold, which is going to react with a physical shader like a diffuse shader. So diffuse shader connects to the threshold or the ramp node, and that is going to be factored or masked for the red channel into a mix shader method. And that is the summary of part 1. In part 2, we are exploring masks and how the ILM map defines the dark region from the light region and the glossiness region. Yes, it's just three simple concepts that you need to grasp. All right, so that is going to be divided in the blue channel, the red channel, the green channel, and also the alpha channel for the outlines, or the little marks, strokes, black strokes that you're going to get along your character. So the alpha is not really transparency used. It is used as storing data, monochromatic data, into another channel. That's it. And then part 3, which has been released now, is exploring additional methods to reconnect the ILM map. But until now, only in part 2, I have shown how you can use the masks to create your shader and then separate light and darkness or shadows in your live mode character or 3D character. Okay, that is why I also created a flat version texture, which will not react to light. It is just a plain texture as any other 3D character. But then we have Fixie, which is a dynamic shading method using this technique, the ILM techniques, where you can choose your uniform color and also your skin color, and also many other customizable parts in her, like the highlights. And that is a dynamic stylized shading method. So in the last part number 4, we're going to explore the other two additional methods which I have not mentioned before, which is working with baked normals, camera views, also camera animation, and also specifically camera scripting. So I hope to have that kind of material edited in the near future because it takes a lot of time. Like part 3, I think it took like around 1 week, and I have not even completed subtitles at this time yet. So I have a lot of work ahead doing the subtitles, but I'm using some tools. So I hope to have the subtitles correctly synced in audio this time and not like last time. Although I did correct it and sent an email about it. So I hope you, if you bought it, I hope you re-download part 2 and everything should be as expected. There's no old video, there's no unsynchronized audio, nothing. There is only right video, correct audio, and correct sync for subtitles. Okay, team, I guess this is just enough, and I'm happy to answer any of the questions or any other questions you have regarding the 3D world, specifically for characters, and rigging stuff like this little bird right here, and any other subject that you would like to address, such as, I don't know, marketing, publicity campaigns, I don't know, commercial advertisement, video game development, I don't know, cinema VFX, whatever you would like. If it's related to these themes, make sure you ask your question down here on the little box, the comment box, and I'll be gladly answering them all. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video, in the next time-lapse video. Thanks. Bye. Welcome to another amazing video that we're going to show this week for a project that I've been captivated for 3 months now. And yes, it's been very hard because I had to do the entire thing by myself, but as you can see, the results are pretty satisfying. I animated this little bird in a matter of 2 hours for 800 frames, straight ahead animation. I don't usually block my animations. Um, for living things such as this one, I just um, tend to watch a lot of reference film birds, in this case with my phone, explore what their traits are and what they do, specifically with their head, since they are very curious animals and they are always watching their surroundings so no predators can, eat them. In this case, this project is a magpie bird, as you can see in the colors. Let me see if I can render this out for you. And sure enough, we have controllers for the eyes, for the tongue, for the beak, for the neck, and well, right now he was just blinking. Let me get another frame. And this project was very long, but also very satisfying in the end because the entire rig took me around 1 month and another month for textures and constraints and coding, and finally this last week I was working entirely for the um, for the oh, there we are, that's it, the eyes. And this just last week we were working completely for this bird completion for the animation. So it's very awesome that we have controllers for many things here. For example, the eyes. I don't know why I'm seeing his eye like so. Let me see if I can, probably something around the light. What about this side? Yeah, it was the light. So he can even blink, and he can also uh, grow the pupil. So oops, in our case, I remove key. I'm still working with the automatic tool to the keying, to the keyframes. But anyways, this project, it's looking pretty awesome. The rig is pretty slick. It worked very well. And let me just show you the schematic view, because this, as you can see, has got a lot of scripted operators, a lot of functions that will allow me to easily move the bird, a lot of hierarchies, a lot of children, and what this is most full of, it's the feathers. I did two complete separate rigging systems. One was a light rig system for this basic controller thing, and the other one, which you can probably see right here, not that much, it's a complete and very heavy controllers for the wings. Look at that. Amazing, huh? Well, each one of those little controllers there do something different on each of the feathers. So you can imagine I really had to place each one of the feathers one by one, and then allow the rig to manipulate it so that whenever possible the bird will do a nice wingspan with everything that it's required for the bird to do when flying. So let's just, as you can see, this is my list for the layers. Got a lot of layers. In my case, I'm going to hide this because it's just too heavy for the viewport. And let's check this out again. So the bird comes here, and then he jumps, checks his environment. I had to play a lot with his neck and the head so that it will feel alive, because they got this kind of a automatic suspension between the body and the head. So that's something that definitely had to go there, and it worked quite nicely. So let me see if I can render this out now. You should see the eye. Anyways, it's got feathers, it's got fur, it's got a tongue, a beak, and every animation controller that I could think for his performance. It's on this lightweight rig. So thank you very much for watching this. I have around 56 hours of time-lapse video for the creation of this bird, and Softimage right here is going to be around. I'm going to still take ideas from what I used to work on this amazing software and porting them into Blender. So don't worry. If you want to know more news about all of these, please subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the bell button so you get instant notifications whenever I upload a new video. I have like 4 or 5 videos that are on the edit room, but I really had to finish this project first. So thank you very much for your patience, and I hope to see you on the next video.